Alright guys, so I am working on a Valheim video because I bought it for me and a friend. However, I have to talk about this because just recently I unironically made a video about why I dislike Tarkov's current state and what BSG have done with it. I titled the video Why Tarkov Feels Different in 2025. And looking at it now, again, lots of views, lots of attention. This video brought a lot of traction to my channel. And it was me stating that the problem with the game was very clearly balance, optimization, and cheaters. I have forever since I've started playing the game back in 2022 believed that these three are core competencies that the game needs to fix, it needs to solve. Now, since 2022, since I started playing, optimization, the game runs infinitely better than it ever used to. That is a fact. The game runs infinitely better. However, does it run good? No. The game runs like shit. I, for one, have a 2060 Super, which is a pretty bad GPU, some might say, but it runs 95% of games at some of the highest settings. And I still cannot run Streets of Tarkov, even with the low resolution mode that they offer in the game. The game is still not up to scratch when it comes to optimization. However, that's not what we're here to talk about in terms of the video. It's just that it is ironic that I posted this video 2 weeks ago, and come yesterday, they release the hardcore wipe patch for Tarkov, which is part of their roadmap for the official 1.0 release of the game. Now, the 1.0 release of the game is planned this year. I think that it's too late since the beginning of development of the game, and at the same time too early. Way too early to release 1.0. There are lots of kinks to iron out, which will lead to it being essentially like Minecraft was, where you have 1.0 release, and then you get to 1.21. Tarkov is not going to have Tarkov 2. However, it will have constant updates. So 1.0.1, which they leveled it here, would be the considered official version of the game, or at least, oh, my keys, or at least initially for a while. It would be similar to the way Cyberpunk was released, with lots of issues and lots of problems, at least that I think of. Remember, this is my opinion. Take everything I say with a grain of salt in this video. This is not like me saying anything. I'm just quickly covering the whole topic because I feel like it is on fire right now. And I've also got a couple comments, which I'll put up on screen right now, that I've put on Landmark's video, or first video on the hardcore wipe, and some of the responses I gained, because honestly, it's quite a hot topic right now, and I sympathize with everyone. I get everyone's perspective. I understand that some of the things that they have introduced are good. They are beneficial to the game. That is objective, not subjective. Some things are subjective. However, objectively, the hardcore wipe is absolutely terrible. Not terrible as in terrible to play. It is horrible to play. I suck at the game. I'm a casual player. I will come out and say this. I'm not good at the game. I'm better than some people. I'm not good at the game. I'm not saying I cannot compete. I already have, in about 6 raids, I have a KD of 3.5. Most of them players on Factory in the hardcore wipe. I've played a bit. I'm maybe level 3. However, it is infinitely harder to play than it ever was before, which I understand because it is called the hardcore wipe. But it removes 80% of the game in its mechanics. It is not a matter of what they've done essentially, because they haven't added anything. They simply changed values and removed mechanics and content. The way they made it harder is literally removing parts of the game, because the only way the game becomes harder is to just remove parts of the game entirely. So they have removed access to the maps. They have removed access to the maps in the traditional way, where you can click on them and select the map. You have to now spawn on either Factory, Customs, or Ground Zero and transit your way to the other maps. That isn't inherently bad. However, for the casual players, it is impossible to get anything done. Everyone is camping. There is an absolute rat culture developing right now around the transits, and I just think it is absolutely insane. Some of the things they changed to make it hardcore, because I cannot say they added things. They don't add anything. They just removed or changed a few values. They disabled the flea market. I, for one, can live with that. Whenever I play the game, I tend to avoid the flea market because it can get really expensive and prices overinflate quickly. I always just use the advice of stick to the traders. If you can buy from the traders, get it. If you can't, don't get it. The only thing you use the flea market for is your hideout, but if you only if you can afford it and you have lots of expendable rubles. Increase hideout requirements. I don't care. No founding rain needed. for hideout zones only. That never affected me. I was fine with finding items in raid. Grinding a bit, like an extra 2 raids for a few items was never a bad thing. Again, never really used to craft ammo. These are not inherently bad. Okay. I would say, for most people, these don't affect most people. Maybe the flea. The flea does affect people. But most of these don't really affect anyone negatively. What does affect people negatively are the 2 things, which is these 2. Restricted location accessibility. This is stupid. I'm not saying it's bad. It does encourage the use of the transit feature, which I have used even before we were forced to. I think it's fine. It's a good feature because you can go from one map to another if you haven't found the right stuff, or if you want to do that one quest where you have to go through every map and extract and survive and whatever. I think it's fine. You can exponentially grind XP. It's perfectly okay, especially if you don't die. You have ammo, you have food continuously. You can go back in and out from raids. It's perfectly fine. You basically just skip the stash. However, everyone is forced to play Factory, Customs, and Ground Zero. Now, Customs is a good map. That is factual. It is structurally, and in terms of spawns, loot spawns, and enemies, it is a good map. It is a balanced map. All areas of the map are, in my opinion at least, very well structured. Ground Zero, on the other hand, still needs a bit more work, and optimization on the map is still terrible. It is a mini streets, which it was intended to be, but a mini streets. It is very, very poor to run. On my system, with lots of RAM to go around for every player, asset, whatever, good GPU, and really good processor, I can not run Ground Zero above 60 FPS, 50 FPS at best, and I'm on a 3K, 2K monitor, having to take my resolution down to 1K. The game simply just does not render properly. There are way too many things, and optimizations such as occlusion, even though it's experimental, it does not seem to work. And finally, Factory, especially with Tagila running around and with all the people constantly playing Factory and having to go to the transit to Woods or Customs is horrible, because the quickest transits in the game right now are through Ground Zero and Customs. However, if you manage to get out of Factory, that is the single fastest one, and people keep camping. Camping is not a problem. Rat activity has always been around. I used to camp, granted not for any more than 10 minutes because I would get bored. I don't have the attention span to camp. Okay, I know people always do it because they're in it for the loot, they're not in it for the experience, but I just get bored. The thing with camping, especially now, is that you cannot play. You cannot get money. The scav cooldown was an hour. Maybe they fixed it. I have no idea. And there is no insurance. It literally costed me 800,000 rubles for only a gun, a headset, and a pack armor. I had nothing else. It was an M4 with 1 mag. I was going to go in with 1 mag. Not even able to reload. 1 mag, single fire, M4, and it was 800,000. Meaning insurance is not only discouraged, it is blatantly impossible to do. What does that mean? Well, if you play Factory, you are cooked. You cannot play. You play Customs, Rashala running around, every transit extraction being surrounded by scavs or people camping in corners where you cannot see them, especially around Crack House. Cooked. And Ground Zero is so poorly optimized, I hate playing on it. That is cooked. If you can run Ground Zero, again, it is arguably a really good map, but it still lacks fundamental optimization. Low down the list in terms of the loot pool that it offers, even in the base game before they introduced the hardcore wipe mechanics with the limited rare loot spawns and occurrence. It doesn't offer enough to be worth playing. The first handful of tasks being on Ground Zero, fine. I'm perfectly fine. Beginning of the wipe, I go in with whatever I have, I get my tasks done, maybe I get a kill or two, and then never have to play Ground Zero again. That is how I do it. I just do not like the map. That is my opinion. However, objectively, it is very poorly optimized, the quests are boring, and the fact that we are now forced to play it just so for some of us that can even run streets, if you can run streets, which I envy you, because it is a huge map with really good loot. The transit system is good. I see what they're doing. I see the vision. However, forcing casual players into a wipe, especially those of us that do like PvP, because I don't really want to play PvE. I'm okay with playing PvE. I have a friend that has bought the game a couple days ago, but now we cannot play PvP because it is hardcore and I cannot teach him anything, and it is literally missing all the mechanics I would want to teach him. So I offered to get him PvE, but he doesn't want to play PvE. but we cannot play PvP either because we would just get killed every raid. Whether he dies and then I cannot teach him the game, or I die and therefore he has to survive and fend off by himself, even though he doesn't even know how to check his magazine, it's completely in shambles. That is a different situation though. So for those of us that do like PvP but are casual and actually go outside every now and again and don't spend hundreds of hours a week playing the game, it's terrible. And that is a large part of the player base. I'm going to get into that in a minute. Is that this caters to a very small chunk of the player base. I saw an argument in a comment section where someone said this wipe caters to 0.1% of the player base. And the counter argument to that was someone saying, well, the game already caters to the 0.1% of players that want a hardcore experience, so why not offer it to them? And to that I say, you're full of shit, because I love the game, but I do not want to spend time, hours, and stressing over dying continuously. The game is stressing as it is. Why make it more stressful, especially for those of us that like the harsh environment, the mechanics, the sounds, the looting, and the extraction part of the game? Because, again, like I said earlier, I'm not the best at the game. I'm not even good, but I want to enjoy it because I like the game. You don't have to be good to like a game. You don't have to. You like a game, you don't have to be good at the game to like that person that said, well, actually, it does cater to the 0.1% of players worldwide anyway that want this sort of experience. Yeah, maybe it does. Maybe you started playing it because you heard it's the hardest shooter out there, and if you're good at the hardest shooter out there, you're good at most games. Fair enough. Maybe that's you. I wouldn't blame you. I bought it because I thought it looked cool. I completely believe that any argument that says that what they've done with this wipe is beneficial is just licking their feet when they shouldn't be. This wipe does nothing but get rid of existing players that were committed to the game, even to a casual experience, and it just forces them out of the game in favor of the streamers and the people that actively want the hardest experience out of the game. There are people out there that prefer as it is, the hardcore wipe. That's fine. We can have different opinion. We can agree to disagree. I'm not going to sit here and say that your opinion is worth any less than mine, because who am I to judge? However, like I said earlier with that guy's example of, but the game already caters to the... It's very sensitive, but you have to understand other people's point of view. It's just terrible for the game, and people don't understand that it is driving players away more rapidly than it is bringing people in. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the limited trader interaction. Now, this one I have heard that they will enable traders tasks and leveling up and getting to trader level 2, 3, and 4 later down the line. Some people were estimating around a week. And someone on YouTube made a good point, saying, well, why don't they limit some tasks but keep the initial ones at the beginning in? They want to slow down progression. What progression was there to keep the first tasks, especially the ones that were in ground zero? 5 tasks? That would have got me playing. I don't know, I'm just saying. Removing tasks from the game, even if you are to introduce them later down the line, yes, it's slowing down progression a lot. Yes, you're having a lot more bum fights in the game. But what it is doing is it removes 80% of the game. And this isn't subjective. This game, besides the PvP aspect, which everyone loves, and I get it, there are some kinks to iron out, but the PvP is what we play for. That is why we play PvP, and I don't play PvE. Let's be real, we play for the PvP. We want to fight other people. By taking away the tasks, you are removing, I would argue, 80% of the game. If people have nothing to build towards other than ruble counts and a KD, then you have a huge problem on your hands, because the drive to play is no longer there. There is no incentive to play the game other than to fight people. And once you run out of gear to fight people, which you cannot get unless you play a scav, which early wipe no one even has that good of an access to, people are going to stop playing. Or people are going to absolutely start slowing down how they play. You are going to see a lot less people in raids because everyone is waiting for a scav. Everyone has lost items. Even if you can successfully extract 10 times in a row, when you die a couple of times, you have already lost much of your progress. Maybe there are exceptions. There are people that do get rich, even with the rare items being limited on occurrence. People do get money. That's fine. I get that. One of the largest reasons to play the game is to complete the tasks, which if you go on YouTube, you will see most Tarkov videos are named after either a challenge, an event, or a task such as Shooter Born in Heaven. The tasks are fundamental to how the game functions. I understand they may be limited at the beginning. There will not be an incentive to play without the tasks. Even if they are added later on, the initial time without them is going to deter those people from playing. And we can see that right here on Active Player. Now, Active Player I know, is decently trustworthy. Their numbers are not always exact, but they offer a very, very big estimate and average, which in most cases is pretty accurate. Now, if we go here, we're going to see that right now the game has 24,000 players. That is horrible. 261,000 daily players. Again, considering this game in the past, that is horrible. We are in the second day of wipe at a prime hour for gameplay right now. We are at a time where this is peak players. If Tarkov is peaking 24,000 the second day of wipe, something happened. And I am confident that a large amount of these players are not even playing the PvP, they're playing the PvE. Because you still need an internet connection to play the PvE. These people are playing the PvE. A lot of these people are playing the PvE. Not many are actually playing the PvP. There are very few, or maybe it's 50-50. And even if it is 50-50, that is 12,000 people. That is half. That is 100,000. That would be 600,000. It is imperative that you guys understand that these numbers, looking at the history of the game, are tiny. Monthly players in December 2024 with the last big wipe. 3 million. We are looking at almost triple the number we have now, which would put this number to shame at roughly 60 to 70,000 concurrent players, which is again a huge number, especially for this game. It would be huge because let's say 30,000 are playing PvE and the other 45,000 are on the PvP live service. That is a lot of people. However, we are at a third of what we were. As you can see, historically, every time there's been a wipe, players spike. Why? It's obvious, because returning players actually stand a chance now. We are no longer against meta chads level 70, killing everyone in an instant, and cheaters at their all-time peak because they have inventories full of expensive loot that they can do real money transfer over. However, if you look at the last wipe, the last 3 wipes even, January 2024, which was the biggest one I've played in a while, to the current wipe, granted, it has been only a day, but a spike of, what is that, 150, 149, 139,000? That is tiny. That is half of daily players currently, extra to what they had at the end of the last wipe. It is terrible. People are not playing. You look at Twitch, people are not watching. You look on YouTube, there's not that much more activity anymore in the game. Now, what does this mean for the game? But I've also seen a lot of people argue that throughout the progression of this hardcore wipe, it is encouraging people to, instead of playing the live extraction part of the game, which is Escape from Tarkov, there is encouraging people and giving them an incentive to play Tarkov Arena, because they can level up and make money externally without risking losing. If you are to try and give an incentive for people to play Tarkov Arena, it should not be rewards in the extraction part of the game. Although it is a benefit and it gets people playing Tarkov Arena, I think the best bet to get people to play Tarkov Arena is to make Tarkov Arena actually find reasons to keep players engaged without just changing a few numbers and making progression in Tarkov Arena slower, as it already is insanely slow. That it might not be the best course of action to simply remove 80% of the game mechanics in order to just slow down a wipe and then slap on the label of hardcore, as if people weren't already setting themselves the challenge of playing hardcore wipes before you introduce these changes. Now, their reasoning for this is potentially, no one is making you play the PvP version of the game. If you don't like the hardcore settings, go play the PvE. The problem is that, for example, my friend has bought the PvP version of Tarkov because it is the only version of Tarkov. If he wants to play the PvE version, he either has to upgrade to the Unheard Edition, which he does not have money for, or buy the PvE version separately. Why is it that if you don't like the changes they have made this wipe, you either have to spend more money or spend more money? It is crucial that people understand these are not good changes from a development point of view. I completely understand that there are incentives that are driven from these changes, such as people no longer being reliant on the meds in their secure containers. I think that is a perfectly fine change on its own. What I don't think is fine is to include it in a version of the game where you cannot pick your own map, you have no insurance, and everything is double the price and more expensive. New and even returning players are going to have a terrible and difficult time not only adjusting to these changes, but learning everything else along the way. So when you go to reintroduce everything else into the game, it is almost an entirely different game, especially for people that are just getting started into it. Now, to reiterate before anyone says anything, is that these changes are to some extent good. They have made good changes. 100% boss race spawns, that's a good thing. No meds in the ass, that's a good thing. Forcing transit, that is objectively a good way to introduce people to the transit mechanic. However, the way they have gone about it, it is terrible. Limiting traders, and therefore their tasks, is the single most stupid change they could have made, even though it might be that it is temporary, as they have said it is temporary. It is arguably, in my opinion, the dumbest thing they could have possibly done, because numbers show they have killed their player base, and people no longer want to play this wipe at all whatsoever. But it does again put a strain on the average, if not casual player. People do not have always dozens of hours in a week to sink into a video game, and these guys are not being aware of that. They are not making the game any easier for the people that do not have the time of day to spend playing constantly. I am not saying make the game easier for everyone. What I am saying is stop implementing changes or events that are, in this case, mandatory to play even as a casual player, unless you fork over some more money to go play PvE, which is a horrible thing, by the way, just to try and cater to people that do have the thousands of hours in a week to play the game. It is fundamentally, and if you really just sit down and sit back from your computer just a little bit, and stop thinking, oh, BSG are always doing good, oh, these changes are awesome, I love when the game is absolutely extremely hard, ooh, this is awesome, and think about the fact that you're not the only one playing. Alright? You are, for those of you that are agreeing that these changes are 100%, and I mean all of them are good and positive for the game, you have to remember you are the 0.1% they are catering to. The rest of the player base has stopped playing and actively advocating against most of these changes, saying that they are terrible. The fact that they are enforced on people, especially for those that have not spent over, what is it now, $60 in total to get the base game and PvE, just to go play PvE instead of PvP. The fact that they are catering to the 0.1% and not looking at the 99% out of their player base, to me that just says that they are not engaged with the community. I think that my video, even the previous one, where I mentioned the kinks they had to iron out, still stands. There is still a problem with cheaters. They have not changed any of that. You can look at one of Landmark's videos. I believe the first raid he plays, he dies to an absolute rage cheater. Optimization is absolutely horrible. They still need to fix optimization. This wipe is absolutely stupid. I don't think they could have made a more terrible choice. And my friend, to get the game, when he did a couple days ago. Couldn't also have made a more terrible choice, but we couldn't have known these would have come out. No one did. Video games are made to be enjoyable. Okay? It sounds counterintuitive, but I wanted to play Tarkov because I loved the game. I wanted to enjoy the game. Sit down, play a couple raids, go to bed. Because I like the game. It is not enjoyable to have 80% of the content restricted, put behind a waiting queue, or just flat out cut from the game and forced to play only certain maps. It's not. And for those of you saying just go play PvE, you have to think of the bigger picture for those of us that do not have PvE. Because not everyone has the money to have PvE, or some of us have a higher edition of the game, which unfortunately, even though we've spent more money on it, does not come with PvE. So yeah, I guess this video just ends up like old man shouting at the clouds kind of thing. This is just another video in the ocean. Not many people are probably going to see this. They're not going to change anything about the game. The game's going to come out 1.0. It's going to be in shambles, I'm calling it. And if it's good, well, guess I'll retract my words, but I really doubt it will be. It's really not going to be any good. The audio is still messed up. I like to think I have a pretty decent headset, and I still cannot hear most of the things in the game, even though I had a Razer Tactical, and I even found Comtac 5s at some point. Yeah, the sound is absolutely horrid, and optimization out the window. Cheaters galore. I have gotten multiple notifications about people I've gotten banned already, and I've only been playing for about a week, or when the last video came out, 2 weeks, I think. So that puts it at just under 3 weeks that I've been playing. That's all for me. I'm going to try and cut this video down so it doesn't get too long. If you stayed until the end, hey, thank you so much. Let me know in the comments. What do you guys think about all this? You want to argue against any of my points? Yo, be my guest, bro. I would love to see what other people have to say, because this is absolutely horrible what they've been doing. But yeah, that's it for me, man. See ya.